The worst pain isn't losing someone. It's discovering that the person sleeping next to you was capable of destroying you, and still smiling while doing it. I thought I knew the man I'd shared almost half my life with. I knew the timbre of his voice, the silences, the scent of his skin after a shower. And I also knew the woman who always claimed to be my friend, the one who sat at my table, laughed at my stories, and called me sister. What I didn't know was that they both shared something that stole me from within, and that their punishment would come from the very lie they tried to maintain. It all started with small cracks. A forgetfulness here, an absence there. The kind of detail we try to justify because it's easier to believe in distraction than in betrayal. But the body feels it. The heart perceives it before the mind accepts it. I looked at him, and something inside me tightened, like a knot squeezing the air I breathed. There was a disconnect between his words and gestures, between what he said and what he let slip through his eyes. It was as if a shadow had settled inside our home, discreet but constant. And the shadow grew longer every time she appeared. Lucia. Always with the same open smile, hands full of gifts, and that gaze that lingered a little too long on him. I convinced myself it was paranoia. That mature women like us shouldn't give in to silly insecurities. But insecurity wasn't what I felt. It was instinct, a warning that whispered deep in my chest, urging me to open my eyes before it was too late. One day, his silence spoke louder than any words. The dry conversations, the rare laughter, the nights when he said he was tired but took forever to fall asleep. The distance between us could now be measured in meters, even though we shared the same mattress. That's when I understood. When love begins to hide its face, lies have already taken over the house. The curious thing is that no one teaches you to recognize the exact moment trust dies. It doesn't fall all at once. It trickles down drop by drop until it dries. And when it dries, a desert remains where a garden once stood. I walked this desert alone, trying to find traces of what we once were. But all I found were footprints that weren't mine. It was on an ordinary afternoon that life decided to show me what I needed to see. And what I found was more than a betrayal. It was a scene that forced me to see who I was, and how much I had forgotten myself trying to sustain what was already dead. Have you ever wondered how far a lie can go before it is discovered? The answer came with the force of a punch. And what seemed like mere suspicion turned into a plan no one expected. Neither he nor she. Because every deception has a limit, and when it goes beyond it, it ends up becoming a prison. And that's exactly where he ended up, trapped in the very lie he tried to hide from me. Trust is like a mirror. Once it breaks, it's never the same again. And sometimes, it's in the shattered pieces that we see what was once invisible. After that day, my house never sounded the same. The sound of the kettle, the creak of the hardwood floor, even the slamming of doors seemed louder, as if trying to let me know I wasn't imagining it. There are sounds only the heart understands. And although I still tried to maintain my routine, everything around me began to change. He smiled less, looked at me less, and when he did, it was as if he were searching for someone inside me who no longer existed. I pretended not to understand, but it was impossible not to notice how his phone got more attention than my presence. The distance between us was no longer physical. It was emotional, and perhaps that's why it hurt more. Lucia continued to show up as often as ever, bringing cakes, advice, and that air of perfect friend. Sometimes I wondered if her guilt didn't live in her eyes, hidden behind mascara and false compliments. She constantly called me sister, and each time she said it, the sound of the word pierced me like thin glass. I began to notice the gestures, the pauses, the silences. It wasn't what they said, it was what they avoided saying. And the more I observed, the more certain I became that something was stirring beneath that calm surface. It was at that point that something inside me began to change. I was no longer the woman who believed everything. Love, when it matures, creates eyes. And mine were wide open. I began to mentally record every detail. A different perfume, a repeated apology, a call cut off mid-sentence. And the more I noticed, the more my body reacted. My stomach churned, my skin froze, my breath became shallow. It was instinct telling me what reasons still insisted on denying. The nights grew long. I could hear the ticking of the living room clock, marking each second until he didn't return. Sometimes the wind would blow through the cracks in the windows and make the curtains dance, and I would stand there, watching, wondering if he felt the same emptiness when he was away. The answer I knew was no. But even so, doubt was an addiction. Because hope, even when it dies, takes a long time to leave the body. I began to look at myself differently. I realized how much I had lost myself, how much I had become the version of myself he needed, not the one I was. It's strange, but it was in this chaos that I found a kind of clarity. When love grows sick, it teaches. And what it taught me is that lies don't hide forever. Eventually, the disguise wears thin. He still tried to keep up appearances. He mouthed, "I love you," but his eyes betrayed otherwise. Lucia, for her part, continued her visits, feigning concern, offering relationship advice as if she were an expert in fidelity. The theater was well rehearsed, but every show has a final act, and I was ready to watch, even if the ticket price was expensive. It's curious how life puts the pieces in place. A small oversight, a thoughtless gesture, a banal coincidence, and suddenly what was hidden reveals itself effortlessly. I just had to wait. The truth sometimes doesn't need to be sought. It comes to you. And when it does, it doesn't ask permission. Perhaps that is why so many people choose to stay here, following each revelation, because they know that, at some point, we have all been on that threshold between love and deception, between trust and awakening. That night, something happened that changed everything. But before I tell you, I need you to understand the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. It's the same silence that enveloped me at that moment, and that, deep down, already carried the sound of the end. That night, the air seemed heavier than usual. The walls of the house held a strange silence, as if waiting for a sound that never came. I could feel my own heartbeat in my chest, an irregular rhythm that betrayed the mixture of fear and certainty. The kitchen light, yellow and tired, created long shadows on the floor, shadows that danced as I moved, as if the entire room participated in that waiting. Something was about to happen, and even without knowing what, I knew it would be final. He arrived late. The creaking gate announced his arrival like a bitter prelude. I didn't get up. I pretended to be asleep, but each step he took through the house hit me like a crack. I heard the sound of a key falling on the sideboard, a shoe being kicked into a corner, the zipper of a jacket carelessly unzipping. A sweet perfume, not mine, invaded the room before he even entered. And in that instant, I realized that love had died forever. No words could resurrect it. In the dim light, my eyes adjusted to his form lying beside me, oblivious to the storm gathering inside me. I stared at the ceiling, and for the first time I felt like I wasn't there anymore. It was like watching my own life from the outside, as if I were a spectator in a film where the character didn't yet know how much was about to change. The contrast between his sleeping body and the turmoil inside me was brutal. He snored lightly, peacefully, as I counted the seconds until dawn. As the sun rose, the brightness flooded the room with cruel sincerity. The light revealed what the darkness hid. His face, too relaxed. His cell phone lying on the nightstand, vibrating with notifications, and I, motionless, caught between anger and disappointment. I picked up the device with steady hands, and there, on the bright screens, was what I already knew, but never wanted to admit. The messages were direct, intimate, vulgar. Every word exchanged between him and Lucia was an open wound. I didn't cry. The tears didn't come. Only a silent warmth took over my body. The kind of warmth that doesn't burn on the outside, but melts what's inside. Instead of despair, I felt lucidity. Disappointment, when it matures, brings clarity. And clarity, however painful, is liberating. I put my phone back in the same place, as if nothing had happened. I went downstairs to make coffee, stirring the spoon in the cup with slow, almost calculated movements. The metallic sound echoed through the kitchen, mingling with the rustling of the trees outside. With each turn of the spoon, I thought about how many times I'd served that coffee with love. How many times I'd believed in an empty good morning. The repetition of these gestures now felt like a farewell ritual, as the scent of coffee wafted through. He drowsily descended the stairs, trying to feign normalcy. We exchanged quick glances, his weary mind too calm, and in that silence I felt the power shift. He didn't know it, but the lie was about to become his prison. From that day on, nothing I did was impulsive. Every smile, every gesture, every cold response had a purpose. I was no longer the betrayed woman. I was the woman who watched, who planned, who waited for the right moment. And while he believed he was in control, he barely realized that his own carelessness was leading him to the abyss. Love, when it dies, leaves traces. And it was in these traces that I found the key to what would come next. Truth, when repressed for too long, does not disappear. It matures. And when it matures, it explodes. Mine was still ripening, and I could already taste the bitter, inevitable taste of what was to come. The following days were a mix of routine and revelation. His every gesture, which had previously gone unnoticed, now seemed choreographed. I watched silently, like someone watching a play for the second time and finally understanding the subtext. The way he picked up his cell phone, the exaggerated care not to leave it on the table, the suppressed laughter when he read messages. Everything was proof, even if he thought he was hiding it well. And Lucia, with her unpretentious visits, seemed even more present. She talked too much, laughed loudly, hugged me tightly. But there was a scent of guilt in the air, sweet and heavy, permeating the walls. Sometimes I watched her without her realizing it. Her gaze betrayed a kind of uneasiness I knew well, that of someone afraid of being discovered. There was a slight tremor in her hands as she held her glass, a strange rush to say goodbye, a compliment that was too forced. She didn't know it, but the game had already changed hands. I was no longer the deceived woman. I was the mirror reflecting their lie. And that, in itself, was the beginning of revenge. The nights, however, remained long. The sound of cars passing by seemed to mark time cruelly, as if each headlight that passed through the window reminded me that something needed to be done. I thought about everything I had discovered and how love can, little by little, transform into something colder, more conscious, almost strategic. The betrayal didn't make me bitter. It made me attentive. And when pain turns to attention, nothing goes unnoticed. I remember the day I saw him leave the house in a new shirt, smelling too fragrant for a simple meeting. The sun streamed through the window and illuminated the room in a way that made me see dust dancing in the air. It was beautiful and sad at the same time, as if life was trying to tell me that even in chaos, there was still beauty. Perhaps that's why many, upon hearing something like this, feel the urge to support, to leave a silent sign that they understand, that they've been through something similar. Because, deep down, those who have never felt the pain of being replaced don't know what it's like to be reborn. The house seemed to breathe with me. Every corner held a secret. Every object carried a new meaning. The bathroom mirror, for example, no longer reflected only my face. Now it showed the woman who was coming back into being. Each morning I looked at myself and saw less guilt, less fear, less trying to please. It was as if the mirror was slowly returning the parts of me it had taken away. And the more I came to my senses, the clearer my certainty became. I didn't need to destroy anything. I just had to let their lies tangle on their own, like loose threads in a poorly woven web. Truth, when patient, has a knack for revealing itself at just the right time. And my time was coming. I began to prepare myself internally. It was a kind of silent, almost spiritual rehearsal. I spoke less, observed more. My gestures became calculated, not out of coldness, but out of wisdom. He continued to believe I knew nothing, and I let him. Power sometimes lies in allowing others to underestimate your intelligence. I still remember one particular sunset. The sky was orange, and the air smelled of wet earth. I sat on the porch and remained there, motionless, as the day faded. It was at that moment that I realized. I was no longer waiting for him to confess. I was waiting for the moment when fate itself would do it for me. Because the truth needs no audience, but when it arrives, no one looks away. And I knew the revelation was near, closer than he could ever imagine. That week, time seemed to drag. Each morning brought the same sequence of automatic gestures. Opening the curtains, putting on the water to boil, listening to the kettle hiss. But inside me, something pulsed differently. I no longer lived for him, nor for the lie that surrounded us. I lived for the right moment. And that moment had a smell, a sound, a presence. It approached like distant thunder, which you sense before you hear it. There was something liberating in knowing. Carrying the truth is a kind of silent power. I watched them both, feigning innocence, while inwardly I mapped out their downfall. Lucia kept coming, perhaps to keep the act going, perhaps out of guilt. She laughed too loudly, talked too much, moved too much. The once elegant woman now seemed clumsy, as if her own body no longer fit the farce. And he, my husband, became increasingly predictable. Every word rehearsed, every gesture repeated, like a tired actor who no longer believes in the role. Sometimes fear would visit me. A strange fear, not of losing him, but of losing myself along the way. I wondered if it was worth continuing to observe, to calculate, to wait for the fall I already knew was inevitable. And then, looking around, I would see my own home. The reflection in the mirror, the cup with lipstick marks, the vase of dried flowers on the table. And I would remember that the greatest loss had already occurred. That of who I was before I knew. That woman who trusted blindly, who believed in appearances, no longer existed. And curiously, I didn't feel mourning. Felt rebirth. The contrast was constant. There were nights when loneliness enveloped me like a cold blanket, and others when strength warmed me from the inside out. Sometimes courage was born in the same place where fear once lived. It's strange, but pain, when it matures, stops burning. It illuminates. And I felt increasingly clear-headed, more present, more in control of my own story. He, on the other hand, seemed to be drowning in his own carelessness. His lies began to stumble over one another. Dates didn't match, clothes smelled wrong, excuses were poorly crafted. His disguise began to crack. And I watched it all with an almost dangerous calm. The calm of someone who has already accepted the inevitable. The game had changed. And he didn't even suspect it. The house, once a routine setting, became a field of observation. Every object became an accomplice. The hallway mirror reflected the expressions he tried to hide. The walls seemed to hold echoes of whispered phone conversations. Even the living room clock marked time differently, as if counting not the hours, but the seconds remaining until the outcome. I realized that, even amidst the pain, something beautiful was emerging. A sense of self. The woman who had previously bent over backward to fit into his world now lifted her face. Not to confront him, but to see herself. And paradoxically, the more I found myself, the more he lost himself. There were days when the sun would stream through the windows with unexpected sweetness, and I'd think that perhaps the universe was preparing me, polishing every part of me for the moment when I would need to shine before its fall. It was as if life itself were conspiring in favor of truth, moving the invisible details toward the grand final adjustment. And as the routine followed the same script, I felt the curtains about to rise. There was something in the air, a subtle, almost electric vibration. Something told me their performance was nearing its end, and that when the last line was spoken, there would be no more applause. Just the exact sound of truth echoing amidst the silence. It was curious to notice how time seemed to bend inside that house. The hours no longer ran in a straight line. They spread out, repeated themselves, dragged on. In the morning, the sun streamed through the window with the same sweetness as ever, but the light was no longer innocent. It seemed to observe, to record, as if it knew the secrets the air held. I moved silently, almost floating, like someone who had learned to breathe in the face of danger. My every step was a calculation, every glance a strategy. And yet, there was a thread of humanity holding me together, reminding me that I was made of flesh, of feeling, of pain, and of hope. Sometimes I watched him sleep. His face was peaceful, his body surrendered, his lips parted, his breathing even. He was a picture of peace, but I knew what lay behind that calm. It's frightening how betrayal can sleep so deeply beside us. I wondered if he dreamed of me or her. And if, deep down, he dreamed of his own fear of discovery? This doubt became a presence, like a constant shadow that followed me even when I was alone. During the day, I maintained my disguise. The discreet laughter, the controlled tone of voice, the look that feigned distraction. It was a role I learned to play perfectly. But inside me, emotions crashed like waves against rocks. There was a part of me that still searched for an explanation, something that would justify the inexplicable. Another part, more lucid and cool, simply waited. Between these two forces, I lived suspended, like a taut rope about to snap. Life continued to unfold around me, oblivious to what was happening inside me. The neighbors chatted about trivialities, the buses passed at the same time, the baker continued his song down the street. And there I was, experiencing an intimate tragedy disguised as routine. Loneliness, even surrounded by people, has its own sound. It's the sound of someone listening to their own heart, trying to find rhythm within the chaos. Lucia, in turn, began to change. Her gaze no longer held mine for long. When she approached, her words were laden with hesitation, as if each sentence had to cross a fragile bridge before reaching me. I saw in her the reflection of guilt, not the guilt that redeems, but the one that corrodes. And it was in this reflection that I found something unexpected. Compassion. Not because she deserved it, but because I realized that her shame was punishment enough. Little by little, I began to understand that love and anger can coexist, but only one survives. And what survived in me wasn't hate. It was lucidity, that quiet clarity that comes when pain has burned away everything it needed, leaving only the clean ground, ready for a new beginning. Even so, fear persisted. Fear of what would come next. Fear of the emptiness that always follows revelation. Because when the truth explodes, the silence that remains is almost deafening. There were times when I felt like crying, but the tears simply wouldn't come. It was as if I'd been crying inside for so long that there was nothing left. Instead, there was a dense calm, a strange, almost dangerous serenity. I knew something was about to happen. Tension built in the air like electricity before a storm. One night, as he talked on the phone in the backyard, I thought I heard the sound of fate itself stirring. A distant creak, a subtle omen. Maybe it was the wind hitting the gate, maybe it was just my imagination. But in that instant, I knew the wait was over. My breathing slowed, my heart steady. And for a moment, between fear and relief, between shadow and light, I felt the truth was already coming. It didn't matter when. It only mattered that it would come. That night, the wind seemed to carry omens. The trees swayed violently outside, and the gate made a metallic, almost restless sound. I was awake, but motionless, listening to every noise in the house as if it were the beating of a strange heart. Or perhaps that of something that had already died. He came into the room later than usual, the scent of someone else's perfume clinging to his skin, trying to mask it with the old air of exhaustion. I kept my eyes half closed, letting him believe in my sleep. Sometimes you have to appear inert to observe the real movement of things. The next morning, the world seemed clearer. The coffee was boiling on the stove. The sound of cups clinking together was almost symbolic. Every detail took on a new meaning. The newspaper folded on the table, the phone face down, his gaze avoiding mine. And I, calm, just watched. It was like watching a string stretched too thin, about to snap. I knew it would only take one small touch, one tiny gesture, for the theater to collapse. But I wasn't in a hurry. I'd learned that haste is the enemy of revelation. The power lay precisely in waiting for the right moment. So I began moving the pieces without anyone noticing. Carefully chosen words, subtle questions thrown as bait, gestures that seemed innocent but had direction. He didn't notice. Lucia didn't either. Their secret was closing like a circle around them, and I was simply following the pattern. As the days passed, the consequences began to show. He grew increasingly restless. His easy laughter gave way to long silences. His cell phone never left his pocket, and his excuses became repetitive, fragile, predictable. It was clear that the lie was now weighing more heavily than the pleasure of hiding it. I watched him from afar and felt almost sorry. Almost. The feeling was ambiguous. Part of me thrilled for the approaching justice, yet another was surprised that he could maintain such serenity in the face of the announced destruction. Lucia, on the other hand, began to withdraw. The messages diminished. The visits became rare. It was as if she, too, sensed the end, but lacked the courage to face it. Her gaze, when it met mine, betrayed her discomfort. And I knew. Guilt is the kind of prison no one escapes. Times I wondered if I was going too far. If planning their demise wouldn't turn me into something like the very thing I despised. But soon that doubt dissipated. I wasn't hurting, I was giving back. Fate was merely using me as a tool to balance what had been broken. It wasn't revenge. It was justice in its quietest form. I began to notice how people around me reacted without even realizing it. A neighbor commented on his late arrivals. A co-worker eyed him suspiciously. The doorman commented, almost casually, that he'd seen him in places he shouldn't have been. The web of truth began to form on its own, without me needing to touch it. It was like watching a tide rise slowly but steadily, engulfing everything that once seemed safe. Amidst all this, there was also a certain fascination. The way life places us in front of the mirror, forces us to choose who we want to be when no one is looking. And perhaps that's where the most curious point of this whole story lies. The transformation didn't happen when he fell. It began the very moment I stopped trying to hold him. Sometimes I wonder if you, listening to me now, have ever experienced something similar. That feeling of being on the edge between reacting and simply letting time take its course. That calm that seems cold but is actually strength. If you've felt this, you'll understand what I mean when I say there's a dignity only silence knows. What came next wasn't chance, it was consequence. Life is precise in that sense. It doesn't rush, but it also doesn't fail. And that night the tide finally rose, I knew. The lie was about to drown. What came next was a different kind of silence. Not the heavy silence of hidden lies, but a kind of pause that precedes the inevitable. It was like being in a station before a storm, feeling the air shift, watching the clouds gather on the horizon. I knew the end was approaching, and the strange calm that enveloped me was the certainty of someone who already knows the outcome but chooses to await the final scene with composure. He seemed to be slowly unraveling. His eyes were tired, his words were short. His gestures were automatic. That man who had once enchanted me was now just a distorted reflection, an actor lost in his own script. Sometimes, I watched him with a mixture of pity and fascination. How could someone so sure of himself lose himself so visibly? The lie was slowly consuming him, and the worst part was that he still thought I couldn't see it. Lucia, for her part, no longer knew how to exist. Her withdrawal was her attempt to cover her tracks, but guilt has a scent, and hers permeated everything she touched. It was curious to see her trying to maintain the same warmth, the same false smile, as if time could erase the memory of gestures, of exchanged glances, of forced coincidences. I saw her fragmenting, losing the radiance she once pretended to possess. The weight of the secret is crueler than any punishment. The days blended together, and tension spread like a spilled perfume. I could feel the change even in the air. The clock seemed to tick slower. The curtains moved on their own, betraying the passage of the wind, and the creaking of the furniture at night sounded like whispers. It was as if the house itself, witness to everything, was preparing to watch what was to come. Within me, a constant duality. Part of me longed for the moment when all would be revealed, for the liberation that only the truth brings. But another part felt a kind of anticipated mourning, because deep down I knew that when the mask fell, nothing would remain. No love, no anger. Just a clean void where once there was a home. It's strange to long for the fall and fear the silence that comes after it. Sometimes I wondered if he still remembered me before all this. The woman who believed, who smiled easily, who waited on the porch with hot coffee and hope in her heart. Maybe so. Maybe it was this memory that made him hesitate with his words, or glance at me, trying to understand what I knew. It was the look of someone who senses danger approaching but can no longer escape. The evidence was all in my hands, but what struck me most was that I didn't need it. The truth had already become visible, crystal clear. It didn't shout, it whispered. It appeared in the tiredness of gestures, in the excuses that didn't hold water, in the lack of brilliance in someone who once exuded arrogance. A downfall, I realized, is never a single act. It happens gradually, in small doses of self-sabotage. He was already trapped in his own plot. And I, contrary to what I imagined, felt no pleasure. I felt something deeper, almost sacred, a bitter understanding that true justice needs no spectacle. It happens at the exact moment the other understands the extent of the damage they've caused, and realizes there's no going back. Yet there was something still unresolved, a shadow that haunted me. It was the feeling that, even with the end near, something inside me still needed to be freed. Maybe it was forgiveness. Or maybe it was the last link that bound me to him, the desire to see with my own eyes the moment when the lie would crumble completely. And so, amid the sound of the wind and the restrained breathing of the walls, fate began to move, discreetly but decisively, and I knew the time was near. That life, patient until then, was preparing to show what happens when the theater ends and the lights finally come up. Dawn arrived thickly, like a veil covering the truth before revealing it. I felt the body of the house pulsate, as if it were breathing along with me. The living room clock ticked away with a slow, drawn-out rhythm, and each second seemed to carry the weight of an ancient weight. I knew the outcome was near, and yet there was a gentle chill in my soul, a hesitation that came not from doubt, but from awareness. When one is about to change everything, even certainty disguises itself as fear. Dawn brought a different clarity. The sun, filtered through the curtains, painted the floor with golden streaks that looked more like wounds of light. The routine began the same as all the others, but there was something imperceptibly out of place. He moved as if carrying the weariness of a secret. Lucia didn't show up that day. Perhaps she sensed the end. Perhaps fate itself had decided to spare her from being there when the truth decided to reveal itself. I remained silent, observing. The sound of the spoon hitting the cup, the rustle of the tablecloth, the smell of coffee. Everything seemed ordinary, but it was only appearance. Apparent peace is the favorite disguise of falling. When his body leaned over the table for a moment, I wanted to ask, was it worth it? But I said nothing. Some answers don't need questions to exist. The contrast between what I saw and what I felt was almost unbearable. On the outside, calm. On the inside, thunder. The love that once moved me was now just a distant echo, like a song slowly fading. What remained was something deeper, a cutting lucidity, a dignity that didn't ask permission to exist. And as he spoke trivialities, I realized how much the sound of his voice had changed. Before, it had been full of certainty. Now, it was the voice of someone trying to hold together a world that had already crumbled. The previous days had taught me to see beyond words. Lies have gestures, small slips, silences that carry more weight than entire sentences. He contradicted himself with his gaze, stumbled over his own stories, and I simply recorded it all in my memory. The truth was no longer something to be discovered, but something to be seen by those brave enough to look. And I was. Sometimes at night, I would find myself imagining what everything would be like when the final veil fell. There was no longer any desire for revenge, nor any pleasure in imagining his suffering. What moved me now was something else, an almost serene impulse for justice, a desire to end a cycle with the same grace with which I endured pain. Because true strength lies not in screaming, but in the posture of someone who goes through hell and emerges on the other side without losing their steady gaze. Memories of the beginning came back in flashes. The touch of his hands in mine, Lucia's laughter on Sunday afternoons, the feeling of trust one swore would be eternal. All of this now seemed to belong to another life, another body, another woman. And yet, there I was, breathing, alive, rebuilt within the very landscape where I had been destroyed. That was the irony and also the miracle. As the day wore on, I realized that fate enjoys silent ironies. Sometimes it destroys not with explosions, but with subtlety. It simply turns the mirror around and lets each person face themselves. And that's exactly what began to happen. A longer look, a suspicious expression, a slip. The web of lies began to unravel before his very eyes. The sky outside darkened prematurely. The clouds gathered, and the wind carried the scent of rain. It was as if the whole world was breathing along with the house, about to witness the climax. The sensation was physical, almost palpable. And then, the moment the first thunder broke the silence, I knew there was no going back. Something somewhere was about to happen. And when it did, nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same. The rain began suddenly, thick, intense, pounding on the windows as if trying to wake what was still sleeping. He was on the couch, distracted, his cell phone in his hands, the same extension of his body that betrayed him every day. The thunder made the light flicker, and for a moment everything went dark. It was in that brief interval that time seemed to stand still. And when the power came back on, the world was no longer the same. The phone screen, still lit, reflected his face, and behind it, mine. For the first time he seemed to truly see me. His gaze changed. There was no more pretense. No rehearsed excuse would suffice. The lie, tired of being carried, had revealed itself. I just stood there, calm, my gaze steady and my heart light. The truth carried a weight, yes, but it was a good weight, the kind that anchors you, not the kind that sinks you. He tried to speak, but the words were caught between guilt and fear. It was his silence that screamed. In that moment, I realized something that had taken years to grasp. Love doesn't die when betrayal arrives. It dies when respect disappears. And respect had been buried long ago. I just hadn't seen the funeral. Now I saw everything clearly. The colors, the sounds, even the smell of rain mixed with cheap perfume that wasn't mine. Reality was all before me. Raw, ugly, and liberating. I took a deep breath. There was no need for humiliation, nor an audience. Revenge, sometimes, is just letting the other person drown in what they created. He tried to explain himself, pick up the pieces, erase the evidence. But it was too late. What breaks inside cannot be fixed. And Lucia, she ended up being the first to disappear. Perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of cowardice. Her silence was the last link to break, definitively ending that triangle that should never have existed. Life afterward became quieter. In the early days, the sound of absence hurt. The empty space beside the bed, the extra chairs at the table, the echo of footsteps in the house. But little by little, that same silence became peace. I discovered that the sound of solitude can be beautiful when you understand that it is, in fact, freedom. It was like opening a window after years of breathing stale air. The new air came in, cool, pure, and brought me back to myself. Sometimes I still find myself looking back, but now it's with gratitude. Because it was there, amidst the ruin, that I found what truly mattered. I learned that pain can be a teacher, that the end can be a new beginning in disguise, and that dignity is the last possession no one can steal. Everything I lost to find myself. Everything that hurt to heal. And if you've made it this far, perhaps you've felt something similar at some point in your life. This mix of loss and strength, of weariness and rebirth. It's the kind of story you don't read, you feel. And that's why so many choose to leave a silent gesture, a comment, a sign that they understand. Because when a woman finds her voice again, the whole world needs to hear it. Today, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see the woman who believed in promises. I see someone who survived them all. The reflection doesn't carry sorrow, it carries wisdom. And it's this wisdom that guides me now, lighter, more whole, more my own. My happy ending didn't come from another love. It came from self-love. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that no one loses when they choose themselves. So, if this story touched you, if it awakened something within you, stay here. Like, comment, subscribe, not for me but for you. Because every time we recognize another woman's strength, we multiply our own. And that's how the cycle of pain transforms into power. Today, what was once a wound has become a memory. What was once a loss has become freedom, and what was once silence is now a voice.